When my wealthy boyfriend wanted to drain my blood to save his dream girl's life, everyone thought I would break up with him. Instead, I voluntarily inserted the needle into my vein and agreed to the full blood transfusion surgery. For a moment, my boyfriend thought I truly loved him to death. He made an unprecedented promise that if I cooperated with the surgery obediently, he would give me a title and marry me. But what he didn't know was that I didn't love him at all, nor did I want to marry him. I was only doing this to complete the system's task. As long as I fulfilled 1,000 of his requests, the system would help me return to the real world and cure my husband's terminal illness. When I voluntarily inserted the needle into my vein, an eerie silence fell over the private room. Those who had been waiting to see me humiliated now looked at me with shock and confusion in their eyes. But after just a brief moment of silence, a burst of laughter erupted in the room. Sophia, you're such a loyal dog. 7 years, and you're still so obedient to our Lucas. Lucas, how do you train her? Teach me too. I want to keep one for fun. Nonsense. She's just a poor girl. What else does she have besides her looks? If she doesn't lower herself and cling to him, how else could she get close to a rich young master like Lucas? Suddenly, countless sharp and sarcastic words stabbed at me like blades without mercy, but I endured it all with a blank expression. After all, I had been in this world for exactly 7 years and had long since grown accustomed to these rumors and gossip. These people were all Lucas's fair-weather friends. To please Lucas, they never missed an opportunity to humiliate me over the past 7 years, highlighting their pathetic sense of existence. But I didn't care. My purpose for coming to this world had always been only one thing. That was to cure my husband's cancer. Back then, he inhaled a large amount of toxic smoke while rescuing me from a fire. In less than a year, his condition deteriorated from diagnosis to late-stage lung cancer. In my despair, it was the system that appeared and told me, as long as I willingly went to another world and fulfilled 1,000 of Lucas's requests, the system could cure my husband's lung cancer, and I could return to the real world. 7 years had passed, and this was Lucas's last request, let alone taking my blood, even if he wanted my life. So what? After all, once the task was completed, this body would disappear anyway. Thinking of this, I looked up at Lucas, expecting him to eagerly take me to the hospital as usual. After all, in his eyes, I had been worth less than a strand of his dream girl Zoe's hair for all these years. Previously, when Zoe failed to get a job, he demanded that I give up the interview opportunity one had worked hard to get, insisting I give up my spot for her. When Zoe fell ill with a fever, he ordered me to go out and buy medicine at 3 in the morning during a typhoon. When Zoe got drunk and had a car accident, he didn't hesitate to cross the line and make me take the blame for Zoe. Each time, I completed his requests without complaint, but in return, I only received his increasingly cold gaze. But this time, Lucas's pupils trembled slightly, his eyes filled with hesitation. Sophia, I'm asking you one last time. Are you serious? Among the crowd, Zoe noticed this, and a flash of displeasure crossed her eyes. But she quickly put on a sympathetic expression, pretending to walk forward and hold my hand, her tone full of guilt. Sister Sophia, my leukemia has worsened. The doctor said I need a full blood transfusion to survive. Now in the whole city, you're the only one with the matching rare blood type. If you really replace all my blood alone, you might be drained dry, and you might even die. Zoe said halfway through, but suddenly raised her head, looking as if she was about to cry. Ah, it's bad enough that I'm suffering alone. How could I drag you into this? As I watched her poor performance, I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. 7 years, and she's still the same, playing the victim, seeking sympathy, pushing all responsibility onto others. But anyway, my task was about to be completed, so it didn't matter what she did. Thinking of this, I just smiled faintly. Don't worry, Miss Zoe. I'm volunteering. Saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda, and moreover, I've said it countless times over these 7 years, I'll fulfill whatever Lucas asks. This 600 cubic centimeters is enough for you to get through this period, so please accept it with peace of mind. With that, I handed the blood bag to Lucas with blood on the corner of my mouth. After all, I would soon be able to see my husband again. Just thinking about it made me happy, and curing Zoe's illness meant they could be together properly. It was a win-win situation. No one lost out. But Lucas, who had been so arrogant moments ago, was now stunned for some reason. He stared at me for a long time, as if seeing me for the first time. After a while, he finally took the blood bag, though his voice was suddenly a bit hoarse for some reason. The surgery is tentatively scheduled for next week. Take this money, don't collapse by then, and prevent Zoe from having the surgery. I looked at the check Lucas handed me, somewhat surprised. In 7 years, this was the first time Lucas had offered to compensate me. However, I was about to return to my own world, so this money was completely useless to me. I shook my head, refusing his kindness. I'm simply fulfilling your wish. I don't need money. Being able to help you is enough for me. Hearing this, Lucas looked at me in surprise, his eyes full of confusion. I didn't bother to explain anything, just smiled at him and turned to leave. But perhaps because I had just donated 600 cubic centimeters of blood, I felt a bit dizzy. After walking a few steps, my high-heeled boots slipped on the smooth ice, and my already thin-down jacket was torn by pebbles, letting the cold wind constantly blow in. Seeing my sprained ankle, a burst of laughter immediately erupted around me. It was just 600 cubic centimeters. Look how weak she is. She can't even walk. It's hilarious. All right, stop pretending to be fragile in front of our Lucas. You're just a poor girl who throws herself at him. Do you really think you can climb the social ladder with such childish tricks? That's right. She's just an outsider. Why should Lucas care about her? Lucas, let's go. I've called quite a few beauties for the next party. They're all waiting to meet you. Among the crowd, Zoe also secretly gave me a challenging smile, then hooked her arm through Lucas's and sat in his passenger seat. I didn't say anything, just silently gritted my teeth and slowly stood up, leaning against the wall. Such humiliation had become commonplace for me over the past 7 years. Just as I thought Lucas would leave with Zoe without looking back as he had done before, he suddenly suddenly stopped and walked over to me. After a moment of silence, he finally spoke in a low voice. Never mind. Get in the car. I'll have the driver take you back. When I heard Lucas tell me to get in the car, I was stunned. In 7 years, this was the first time. Before, he was always very harsh with me, looking as if he despised me to the bone. Not only did he never let me touch his car, but he also said that a woman of my class getting into his car would be an embarrassment to him. I remember once when I accidentally steadied myself by touching his car door, he immediately pushed me down, and the next day he even sold the new car he had bought less than 3 months ago. But now, he was actively telling me to get in the car. For a moment, I really couldn't react. The people around us were also stunned, including Zoe. Everyone's eyes were focused on Lucas, their gazes full of surprise. It wasn't until this moment that Lucas seemed to belatedly realize his own slip, a flash of panic unlike his usual self crossing his eyes, but he quickly returned to his usual indifferent demeanor. She's the only one in the city with the rare blood type. I just thought that if it gets dark and the roads are slippery, it would be a waste of all that rare blood if she froze to death outside. For Zoe's safety, I have to ensure this blood bag doesn't have any accidents. This reason, I had already guessed in my heart earlier. Hearing him say this, I didn't feel much turmoil in my heart. After all, Lucas being madly in love with Zoe was something everyone knew. Once when Zoe made a mistake at work and was just scolded by her supervisor, Lucas directly brought down that company. He even used his family connections to blacklist that supervisor, completely ruining his career. Now, for Zoe's safety, he reluctantly let me get in the car once, which was normal. However, I get carsick anyway, so I still declined his kindness. No need, I'll just walk back. Lucas's face immediately turned cold. Suit yourself. With that, he got in the car and left without looking back. Immediately, a burst of mocking laughter erupted around me. Lucas just took pity on you for a moment, and you're getting cocky? Did you really think anyone could get in Lucas's car? With such poor judgment, no wonder Lucas hasn't even bothered to look at you properly in 7 years. Zoe even gave me a smug smile from the car, but I just wrapped my coat tighter and turned to walk towards my home in this world. The night sky in this world was different from my hometowns. Looking at the unfamiliar starry sky, I couldn't help but think of my husband. Although the system had temporarily saved his life, but after not seeing each other for 7 years, he must be very worried about me now. But fortunately, all this was about to end. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but smile slightly. But just then, someone suddenly pushed me hard from behind. Caught off guard, I fell directly into the cold lake water. I had just donated 600 cubic centimeters of blood and was already weak. Now I felt like my whole body was turning into an ice cube, unable to move. Struggling in the freezing cold water, I saw Zoe standing on the shore, looking at me with a cold smile. Well, if it isn't our little wife Sophia, still alive, are you? She walked to my hospital bed, looking down at me with contempt in her voice. I'm surprised you actually signed the surgery consent form. I thought you'd refuse to save my life for the sake of your pathetic self-respect. Looks like you do have some self-awareness, after all. You know that the only use for your worthless life is to save mine. She paused, her tone becoming even more cutting. But don't even think about marrying Lucas. Forget about me not agreeing. Lucas's family would never allow it. How could they possibly let someone like you, with such an unclear background, marry into their wealthy family? With that, Zoe took a bank card out of her pocket and threw it onto my hospital bed. Take this money after the surgery and get as far away as possible. If you ever show up in front of Lucas and me again, you'll face the consequences. But I looked at the bank card and just shook my head. I was about to leave this world anyway. What use did I have for money? I don't need your money. Zoe's face immediately darkened. You're asking for trouble. Since you care so much about your image in Lucas's eyes, I'll make sure you give up completely. The next moment, she grabbed the bowl of hot medicine Lucas had left on the table and suddenly splashed it on her own face. Then, she covered her face and started screaming loudly, pretending to be in pain. Ah, it's so hot. She moaned in pain while secretly glancing at me from the corner of her eye, her lips curling into a sinister cold smile, but her voice still pretending to be sincere. Miss Sophia, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't realize the medicine was so hot. But if doing this makes you feel better, I won't tell Lucas you splashed me. I saw through Zoe's poor acting at a glance. It was the same old trick. She had used this method to frame me more than once or twice. Every time, Lucas would punish me without considering the consequences. Sure enough, the next moment Lucas pushed open the door and walked in. He saw this scene, and his face immediately turned ugly. He then quickly walked up to me and raised his hand, about to hit me. But the next moment, his hand suddenly stopped in midair, followed by a sigh. Sophia, don't let this happen again. Seeing that Lucas didn't actually hit me, not only was I surprised, but Zoe also looked at Lucas as if she had seen a ghost, her face full of astonishment. Lucas, she splashed me. Why aren't you doing anything about it? Don't tell me. You've actually fallen for this bootlicker? Lucas sighed helplessly, then held Zoe's hand tightly. Zoe, you can act up however you want usually. It doesn't matter. But Sophia's safety is very important right now. Without her, your life might not be saved. Let's focus on the big picture, okay? Hearing this, I was suddenly shocked. So, for these 7 years, Lucas had always known that Zoe was doing it on purpose. He just loved her too much, so he knew but didn't say anything. For a moment, Zoe knew she was in the wrong, her face alternating between shades of green and white. Sophia, don't get cocky. Don't forget what I said earlier. Lucas will absolutely never marry you. She glared at me fiercely before storming out, slamming the door behind her. Seeing the awkward atmosphere, Lucas took the initiative to offer to take me back. I nodded. After all, my body was still quite weak. On the way, we passed by a shopping mall. In the window display, a pair of platinum rings shimmered under the lights. The style was exactly the same as the one my husband gave me when he proposed. I couldn't help but stop, my gaze fixed on that ring. You like it? Lucas followed my gaze, his tone indifferent. Let me make this clear in advance. Although I agreed to marry marry you. It's only for Zoe's surgery. Don't even think about wedding rings and such. I only have Zoe in my heart. You're just a wife in name. Don't fantasize about anything. But I just smiled faintly. It's okay. I don't mind. As long as I can help you fulfill your wish, I'm satisfied. Hearing this, the smile on Lucas's face suddenly froze. For the rest of the journey, he didn't say another word until a car at the intersection couldn't brake in time and suddenly lost control, rushing towards us. Lucas was still looking down, seemingly lost in thought, completely unaware of the approaching danger. My heart suddenly tightened. If he died, what about my task? What about my husband's illness? Almost instinctively, I suddenly pushed Lucas away. Sophia, are you crazy? Lucas stumbled from my push, frowning as he looked at me. But the next second, he saw me being hit by the car and lying on the ground covered in blood. His pupils suddenly contracted, his face filled with disbelief. Sophia, he stumbled towards me, his voice trembling. Why did you still save me? I was in so much pain I could barely speak, but I still managed to force out a smile. I just didn't want to see you die. Hearing this, the usually cold and arrogant Lucas's eyes reddened. Fool, you really are a fool. How can there be someone like you in this world? I looked at him, but just managed a weak smile. He had grown up in a world of intrigue and deception among the wealthy elite. How could he have ever seen pure kindness? In the end, he was also a pitiful person. Just as Lucas was about to call an ambulance, his phone suddenly rang. It was Lucas's secretary. Young Master Lucas, it's terrible. Miss Zoe's condition has suddenly worsened. She might not make it. We need to operate immediately. Please bring Sophia over for the blood transfusion right away. Lucas was stunned, looking at me, then at his phone. But Sophia is injured too. She needs treatment now. On the other end of the phone, the secretary was shocked. Young Master Lucas, what are you saying? Who is Sophia compared to Miss Zoe's life? I looked at Lucas, somewhat surprised. In 7 years, this was the first time he had hesitated between me and Zoe. Probably because I had just saved him, and he felt guilty. But I didn't care. I was happy to have the surgery early and complete the task. I struggled to get up from the ground, a wave of intense pain spreading through my body. Let's go. Let's go perform the surgery for Zoe now. Lucas's eyes immediately widened. But you're injured now. If you have surgery recklessly, you could die. I waved my hand dismissively. It doesn't matter. Saving someone is the most important thing, isn't it? Lucas stared at me blankly, his eyes complex. He probably never imagined that in this situation, I would still be thinking about saving Zoe. He was silent for a moment and finally said nothing, turning to walk towards the car. On the way, neither of us spoke. It wasn't until just before entering the operating room that Lucas spoke again. Sophia, why are you doing this? But I just smiled. Of course it's because you're very important to me. Lucas was immediately stunned, a barely noticeable flicker of emotion passing through his eyes. I turned and walked into the operating room. Just before the door closed, Lucas suddenly said softly, Sophia, you're not allowed to die. His voice was very quiet. Although I heard it, I didn't respond. After all, once this surgery was completed, I would leave this world. Such a promise meant nothing to me. In the operating room, under the cold light, I lay on the operating table, watching my blood slowly flow into Zoe's body. Zoe's face gradually regained its rosy color, and her breathing became steady. The doctors all breathed a sigh of relief. I also breathed a sigh of relief, forcing out a weak smile. It's over. These 7 years of strategy were finally over. Ding. Congratulations to the host for completing the task. Your husband's cancer has been successfully cured, and you will return to the real world soon. Meanwhile, upon learning that the surgery went smoothly, Lucas took a deep breath and walked into my hospital room with an exquisite ring box, clearing his throat. You worked hard today. I don't like owing people favors. You've been eyeing that ring, right? I saw it wasn't expensive, so I bought it on a whim. Try it on. But there was no response from me on the hospital bed. Lucas called out in confusion. Sophia, did you hear what I said?